Hey, Luke from Web Refresh here. All right, today I've got a little SEO gem for you all. We're going to talk about how branding impacts your SEO. So there's three key areas that I want to touch on today. Mentions, trust, and memorability. So when you're thinking about branding, you don't usually think, having a great brand or, a weak brand is necessarily going to impact my search rankings all of that much. Um, the bad news is, or the good news is, that it really does have an impact on your search rankings. So the first one I want to talk about is brand mentions. So if you have a good brand, a strong brand, if you're doing, great things in your field, you're building your brand authority, your brand looks great, you have great principles, and you've really invested a lot in thinking about your brand and how you want to be perceived in the digital space, then you're much more likely to get mentions online. And so mentions aren't necessarily anything to do with a link. We all know links are really positive for SEO, especially if they're from high quality and relevant sources. But a mention has a great amount of power as well. If businesses or individuals or blogs or whatever, people on social media, if they're mentioning your brand name, so our brand name is Web Refresh. It's quite unique. A weaker brand name is a little bit trickier. I'll get into that in a second. But if people are mentioning your brand name, Google can connect those mentions with your brand name or brand phrase. It understands your entity online, who your brand is or what your brand is, and it understands that it's unique. It is a little bit trickier if you have a brand that is quite, or a brand name that is quite generic. So say, for instance, you had a brand name called Great Food. Obviously, there's the Great Food Guide, and that comes to mind. But it is a little bit trickier for Google to attribute when people are talking about great food, if they're two different words. There's thousands of people talking about great food online, and it's a little bit trickier for Google to attribute the use of those phrases to your brand. A unique business name obviously comes with developing your brand and investing in your brand. So that's one way that investing in your brand can really help to improve your SEO, and that's through mentions. The next one is trust. So when you're investing in your brand heavily, you're often thinking about how can we develop more trust in our brand? How can we build trust into our brand? What can we do, and what can we focus on that really, puts the customer first? What are our ethics? What drives us? And how do we interact online? So, thinking about your brand and how you're perceived online, you often considering trust as a factor, and how you're going to act and what the guidelines are. So trust is really important for Google rankings as well. If you are being spoken about in a positive way online, then Google is going to understand that sentiment and track it over time, to show, and it will show that either, okay, you have a positive sentiment, you have neutral sentiment, or negative sentiment, and building trust comes into that. So that's one aspect of trust. But another one is, if your brand is really trustworthy, I'm trying to think of a trustworthy brand. I think of National Geographic is one. That's a company we've worked with in the past. Another trustworthy brand, might be World Vision. I see them as pretty trustworthy, and that's, when you're thinking about donations, you want to be able to trust whoever you're donating to. Yeah, there are two that come to mind. Toyota would be another one. Anyway, so if you have a trustworthy brand, and and people are writing about your brand, they're much more likely to link to your brand. So one huge positive for rankings is links, how many links you can acquire. And if you don't have to work for those links, if you're well, it means you don't have to work as hard for those links if you have a trustworthy brand. So we see brands that are popular and trustworthy, they receive more organic links than other brands. Okay, so the next one is memorability. So kind of similar to what I mentioned about uniqueness of your brand name. If you have a memorable brand, then it's going to be much easier for people to obviously connect your brand with your service, but also for people to type into Google search when they want to find you and interact with your business. So a memorable brand will obviously generate more of these searches. And what Google looks at in this instance is, are people searching for this brand more or less over time? And what are they searching for when they search for this brand? So, if you're searching for, web refresh SEO, obviously it makes us more relevant for that SEO search term. But also when people are searching for our brand name, and if they've heard about us and they've just typed us into the search box and they're looking for us and we're getting more searches over time, then Google is going to understand, hey, this is a really valuable brand, or it's getting more valuable, especially around these certain topics. And it will factor that into its algorithm and level up rankings related to those search terms, and obviously for your brand as a whole. So I hope you've enjoyed those SEO gems around branding and SEO. If there's anything you'd like to hear more about SEO in general, we'd love to hear it. Drop us a comment, send me an email. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye, guys.